She raised her glass, smirked at me in front of everyone, and said, "Mark, stop pretending you belong here." And the whole table erupted in polite, poisoned laughter. They thought I'd swallow it like always. They thought I'd sit there smiling, calm, quiet, the harmless husband who never talks back. They had no idea that before the night was over, I'd make sure every one of them saw exactly who she really was, and who I was about to stop being forever. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments if you've ever watched someone finally snap in the calmest way possible. Now let's begin. It was the annual winter fundraiser at the Maplewood Arts Center, the kind of event where the wine was overpriced, the hors d'oeuvres tiny, and the conversations even smaller. Soft jazz floated through the hall. Warm amber lights spilled across polished floors. Couples in sparkling clothes drifted from table to table pretending they knew anything about the sculptures around us. I'd just come from a long shift at the engineering office, still smelling faintly of cold metal and machine oil, but I cleaned up as best I could. My wife, Dana, was already glowing. A navy dress, diamond earrings she insisted on buying last month, hair curled just the way she knew made heads turn. She didn't look at me when I arrived at our table, didn't ask how work went, didn't even nod. She was too busy entertaining her coworkers, a pack of marketing executives who lived for small insults wrapped in compliments. I sat quietly, listening to them brag about campaigns and clients I'd never heard of. I tried to play along, toss in a comment or two, but every time I spoke, Dana would either correct me, talk over me, or give that tight little smile that said, "Please stop embarrassing me." I kept breathing slow, steady. I'd learned that silence kept the peace. Or, more accurately, it kept her from turning that edge in her voice on me. The room shimmered with clinking glasses and murmured conversations. Waiters passed by with trays of sparkling cider, bacon-wrapped scallops, tiny pastries that vanished in one bite. I watched couples lean into each other, whispering, laughing, sharing looks that said, "We're in this together." Dana and I hadn't shared one of those looks in years. When the fundraiser host stepped up to the mic and asked everyone to mingle, Dana drifted toward her colleagues without even glancing at me. I followed a few steps behind, trying not to hover, trying not to seem lost. Though that's exactly how I felt in that sea of polished shoes and practiced smiles. Then came the moment. She was standing with her friends, Paula, Cynthia, and her favorite sycophant, Jeremy, telling some story about a client pitch. I walked up, laid a gentle hand on her back, and quietly asked, "Dana, mind if I steal you for a minute? I want to show you something in the exhibit room." She didn't turn. She didn't step aside. She didn't even lower her voice. Instead, she laughed, sharp, theatrical, and announced to the group, "Mark, stop pretending you belong here. Please, just let the grown-ups talk." The chuckles started immediately, quiet but unmistakable. Jeremy smirked into his drink. Paula gave me one of those pitying looks people give stray dogs. Cynthia stared at the floor, because even she couldn't defend what just happened. Something in me went still, completely still. The kind of stillness that comes right before something irreversible. I removed my hand from her back. I straightened my jacket. I looked at each person in that circle, one by one, until the laughter died out on its own. Not because they felt guilty, no, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't fading into the background. That I simply said, very calmly, "Enjoy your evening." Then I turned and walked away. I didn't storm off. I didn't slam a door. I didn't make a scene. But inside, something enormous had shifted, something quiet and lethal, something that didn't feel like anger at all. It felt like clarity. I stepped into the hall, the music and voices fading behind me, and the cold air from the open side door hit me like a reset button. I stood there alone among the sculptures, looking at my reflection in the glossy marble floor, and without planning it, without rehearsing it, without even knowing what the final result would be, I began the first step of a plan I never knew I was capable of, that a plan that would unfold silently, that a plan that would change absolutely everything. I stayed in that quiet hallway longer than I meant to, letting the cold air settle something inside me. I wasn't hurt anymore, not embarrassed, not angry, just done, but I didn't show it. I walked back into the fundraiser looking like a man who had simply stepped out for fresh air. No one paid attention. No one suspected a thing. That was the beauty of silence. People always assumed it meant softness, not intention. I made my way toward the bar where a tall man in a gray suit was stirring his drink with the kind of practiced boredom only corporate events can create. His name was Alan Brewer, one of the donors on the committee, someone I'd met twice through work connections. We weren't friends, not even acquaintances, but he was the kind of man who remembered faces. "Mark," he said, nodding politely. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Long night," I replied. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" "Be my guest." I knew exactly why I was standing there, but I didn't show my hand. Not yet. If Dana wanted to treat me like dead weight, fine. But I wanted to remind myself that I wasn't invisible, that I didn't need her or her entourage to exist. Alan talked about the turnout, the guest list, the silent auction. I listened, responding calmly, making small observations that actually made him pause, consider, laugh. It felt strange having a normal conversation, one where no one rolled their eyes at me or talked over me. After a few minutes, Alan looked past my shoulder and raised a brow. "Isn't that your wife?" I turned. Dana stood several feet away, her arms crossed, annoyance all over her expression. She probably expected me to trail after her or wait for her signal like always. Instead, she saw me standing beside a man she admired, a man higher on the social ladder. For the first time all night, she looked uncertain. Good. Let her feel it. She walked toward us with quick, clipped steps. "Mark," she said, tight smile, "I was looking for you." "Were you?" I asked calmly. She blinked, thrown off by the tone. Alan greeted her politely. She switched on her charm, the same charm she used on clients and bosses, but never on me. "Alan, so good to see you tonight." "Likewise," he replied. Then he looked deliberately between the two of us before saying, "Your husband was just giving me some very sharp insights about the structural layout for the new tech wing. You should be proud." Her cheeks tightened almost imperceptibly. She hated surprises unless she was the one delivering them. "Oh," she said, forcing a smile. "Mark likes to talk about his work." "He should," Alan replied. "He's good at it." That was when something shifted in Dana's posture. Not guilt, not tenderness, territoriality. She didn't want me, but she didn't want anyone else seeing my value either. I stepped away first. "I'm going to check on the auction items," I said. "Enjoy the conversation." Dana opened her mouth like she wanted to object, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked into the exhibit room, a dim, quiet space filled with paintings and sculptures. For the first time all evening, no one was watching me. I could finally think. The humiliation earlier didn't replay in my mind like it used to. It simply sat there, like the final line in a book I'd already finished reading. I didn't know exactly what step would come next, but I felt the shape of it forming, a cool, measured decision settling deeper with every breath. I wandered past rows of silent art pieces until my reflection appeared in the large glass display case near the back wall. I barely recognized the man staring back. Not because I looked different, no. Because for the first time, there was no confusion in my eyes, no desperation for understanding, no hope she'd change. Just clarity, absolute and clean. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Slow, hesitant, Dana's. I didn't turn. I didn't speak. She stepped beside me, arms folded tight across her chest. "Why did you walk away like that?" she asked quietly. "We were talking." "No," I said, still looking at the reflection. "You were performing." "Mark, don't start." "I didn't." She flinched, probably because I wasn't raising my voice. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't defending myself. And that scared her more than anger ever could. I was just joking, she muttered. You take everything so seriously. Do I? I finally turned my head just slightly, enough to look at her without giving her the full attention she expected. Her expression flickered, nervous, irritated, unsure which face to put on. That's when I realized something important. She had no idea who I was without the version of me she'd slowly created. And she had no idea that the version she depended on, the silent, obedient one, was already gone. I stepped back, giving her space she didn't ask for, space she didn't want, space she'd earned soon enough. I'm going to walk around, I said evenly. Enjoy the rest of the fundraiser. Then I left her standing there, speechless, staring at the man she thought she'd already figured out. I didn't look back. Not once. The night wasn't over. Not for her. Not for me. Not by a long shot. I didn't return to Dana's side for the rest of the evening. I drifted through the fundraiser like a ghost, present, silent, entirely unnoticed unless I chose otherwise. I watched people, listened to conversations, observed the way everyone in her circle orbited around appearances. Not sincerity, not connection, just performance. The longer I walked through that glittering hall, the lighter I felt, like I was shedding something heavy I'd been carrying for years without realizing it. Dana kept glancing at me across the room, first with irritation, then confusion, then something that almost looked like concern, but not for me. Concern for how it looked. Because for the first time, I wasn't standing where she expected me to be. I wasn't watching her. I wasn't waiting for her. I wasn't trying to fit myself into whatever shape she needed to maintain her image. I was simply absent, and she didn't know what to do with that. The host eventually stepped up to announce the closing of the silent auction. People began to gather near the stage, forming clusters of chatter and laughter. Dana stood between Paula and Jeremy, pretending not to watch me. I walked to the far corner, where a display of hand-carved wooden sculptures sat beneath soft lighting. A woman I recognized from the donor list, Linda Matson, was standing there admiring one of the pieces. She was in her early 50s, elegant but approachable, the kind of person who made you feel like she actually heard you when you spoke. Beautiful work, she said without looking at me. Takes patience to carve something so detailed. Patience and vision, I replied. You have to see what you want before you start cutting anything away. She nodded thoughtfully. Most people rush. They carve without a plan. That's how things break. For a moment, I wondered whether she was talking about sculptures or something else entirely. She glanced at me, eyes sharp but kind. I saw what happened at the table earlier. I stiffened, but she wasn't judging. If anything, she looked disappointed, for my sake. I've been to a lot of these events, she continued, and I've seen couples who support each other, who treat each other like partners. What I saw tonight was different. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. You handled it with more grace than most men would have, she said. But don't confuse silence with weakness. Sometimes silence is the first step towards something necessary. She didn't stay long after that. She squeezed my arm gently, just a gesture of human kindness, and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking softly against the floor. I stood there alone again, feeling that cool clarity settle deeper into me. When the fundraiser finally ended, people filtered out into the chilly night air in clusters. Dana walked up beside me, coat draped over her arm, voice low. You made things awkward tonight. I turned to her slowly. I did. She hesitated. I mean, you disappeared. You were cold. People noticed. People noticed what happened at the table, I said calmly. I just walked away. Her jaw tightened. She hated being reminded of her own behavior, especially when there was no angle she could twist. I said I was joking. No, I said quietly. You weren't. For a moment, she didn't have anything to say. She just stood there, arms wrapped around herself, breathing tight little puffs in the cold air. A couple walked past us, laughing and linking arms. Another pair leaned into each other, whispering about grabbing a late-night drink. Dana watched them, and I saw something flicker across her face. Envy, longing, something more fragile than she wanted to admit. Can we just go home? She muttered finally. Fine. The drive home was silent except for the rhythmic swipe of the windshield wipers and the soft hum of the heater. Streetlights passed in long streaks of gold across the dashboard. I watched them, thinking, planning, not revenge, not punishment, just a shift, a real one, a necessary one. When we pulled into the driveway, Dana got out quickly and walked ahead of me, unlocking the door before I reached the steps. The house smelled faintly of pine from the candle she'd lit earlier, the one she always bragged about buying from some boutique. She hung her coat, glanced at me, then looked away just as fast. Are we going to talk about tonight? She asked. Eventually, I said. Not now. She blinked, surprised. I'd never postponed a conversation. She always dictated when things happened. But the dynamic had changed, and she could feel it even if she didn't understand it yet. She went upstairs without another word. I stayed on the first floor, moving slowly, deliberately, taking in the space that had once felt like home, but now felt more like a stage. Everything in its place. Every room curated. Every moment scripted. And I realized something important. I didn't belong in the role she'd written for me anymore. I walked into the small study we never used. The desk lamp cast a soft pool of light over the surface. I opened the drawers one by one, not searching, not rummaging, just preparing. There was no anger in my hands, no rush in my movements, just certainty, pure, absolute certainty. I didn't know what Dana was doing upstairs. I didn't care. What mattered now wasn't her voice, or her excuses, or her apologetic smile that never reached her eyes. What mattered was that something had shifted permanently, something she couldn't undo, something I couldn't ignore. That night, in the quiet warmth of that empty study, I took the first deliberate step toward a life she never imagined I had the strength to create. A step she would never see coming. And I didn't hesitate for a second. I sat in that small study for a long while, letting the silence settle around me like a heavy blanket. Upstairs, I could hear Dana walking back and forth in the bedroom, opening drawers, closing them harder than necessary, pacing the way she always did when she felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Maybe she thought I'd come upstairs eventually, ready to smooth things over. Maybe she thought I'd cave like every other time, offer some apology just to keep the peace. But I didn't move. Not until I was ready. When I finally stood, it wasn't with anger. It was with direction. I walked to the garage, flipped on the light, and looked around at the shelves, paint cans, old tools, boxes labeled with dates from years ago. The air was cool, almost crisp, carrying that faint scent of concrete and motor oil. It steadied me. I pulled out a plastic storage bin from the corner, set it in the middle of the floor, and began filling it. Not frantically, not emotionally, methodically. A few personal files she never bothered to touch. My old journals. The pocket knife my father gave me when I turned 16. The framed photo of me standing beside the first project I ever oversaw at work. A picture Dana always insisted didn't match the decor. I kept adding, not because I planned something dramatic, but because the act itself felt honest. Honest in a way nothing between us had been for a long time. When I returned inside, she was standing at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, the way she always stood when she wanted to look dominant. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "Garage," I said simply. "Why?" "Because I wanted to be." She frowned, thrown off again by the calmness. "Are you punishing me for earlier? Is that what this is?" "No," I replied, hanging my jacket over the chair. "I'm thinking." "About what?" she pressed. "About everything." Silence stretched between us. Not the irritated silence she weaponized during arguments, but something deeper, heavier. Finally, she came down a few steps, her voice tightening. "You can't just walk around acting different." "I'm not acting," I said. "That's the point." Her brows pulled together, and for the first time all night, she looked unsure, like she couldn't read the script anymore. But Dana didn't stay vulnerable for long. She straightened up, flicked her hair over her shoulder, and snapped. You embarrassed me tonight. No, I said quietly. You embarrassed yourself. Her face changed, quickly, sharply. Her breath hitched. She wasn't used to hearing that, especially not from me. You're being dramatic, she said. People joke. Couples tease each other. It wasn't a big deal. To you? I said. Yes. Why do you always twist things? Her voice was rising now, not from sadness, but frustration. Frustration that she wasn't controlling the narrative. I didn't twist anything, I replied. I reacted to what you did. She let out an exasperated sigh. So what now? You're going to pretend you're some wounded saint? You're going to walk around like a martyr. I stepped closer, not aggressively, just close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to keep meeting my eyes. I'm not wounded, I said. Not anymore. She went still, completely still. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done pretending this is normal. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an ultimatum. It was a truth. Clean. Straightforward. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unsure how to respond. That alone told me more about our marriage than any argument ever had. She didn't fight for us. She fought for control, and she was losing it. She turned abruptly and walked upstairs without another word. I didn't follow. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat at the table, staring out the window into the dark backyard. The branches of the old maple tree swayed gently in the night breeze, casting shadows across the grass. It was peaceful, more peaceful than I'd felt in months, maybe years. I stayed there long enough that the house settled around me. The refrigerator hummed. A clock on the wall ticked. The water in my glass stilled completely. Eventually, I stood and made my way to the living room, turning off lights one by one. The glow of the hallway stretched into the room, soft and warm, painting the edges of furniture in gold. It felt like the last quiet moment before something irreversible, though I didn't yet know what shape that something would take. I went upstairs slowly. Dana was in bed already, lying on her side, facing the wall. She didn't say goodnight. Neither did I. I didn't climb in next to her. Instead, I grabbed a pillow and blanket from the closet and walked back downstairs, settling onto the couch. Not out of spite, not to provoke a reaction, but because the distance felt honest. When I closed my eyes, the quiet didn't suffocate me the way it used to. It steadied me, strengthened me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel overshadowed. I didn't feel trapped in a life I didn't recognize. I felt, strangely, unexpectedly, like a man waking up. I didn't know yet what tomorrow would bring, or what decision would crystallize in the morning light. But as I drifted to sleep on that worn old couch, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The ground beneath our marriage had shifted, and it wasn't shifting back. Not this time. Not ever. Sunlight was already pressing through the living room blinds when I opened my eyes, warm and too bright for how little sleep I'd gotten. I sat up slowly, feeling the stiffness in my neck from the couch, listening to the soft creaks of the house waking with me. For a moment, I simply sat there, breathing in the quiet, letting it fill me. It felt different this morning. Cooler, cleaner, as if the air itself understood something had shifted. I folded the blanket, placed the pillow back in the hall closet, and walked into the kitchen. The house was unusually silent. No footsteps upstairs. No sharp voice calling for something. No clatter of makeup containers on the bathroom counter. I brewed a pot of coffee, leaning on the counter as it dripped, the steady rhythm somehow grounding. When I finally heard movement above me, it wasn't the brisk, confident walk Dana usually carried. It was slower, uneven, hesitant. She came down the stairs a minute later, wrapped in her robe, hair tied back loosely. She stopped at the bottom, staring at me like I was a stranger she wasn't sure she should approach. "You didn't come to bed," she said quietly. No accusation, no sarcasm, just confusion. "No," I replied. "I didn't." She swallowed, fingers twisting the fabric of her robe. "Are you still upset?" "I'm not upset." That's what made her flinch, because she could hear how honest it was. Anger, she could fight. Frustration, She could counter. But calm detachment? There was no weapon for that. Can we talk? She asked, voice cracking just slightly. I nodded and walked to the dining table. She followed, sitting across from me, shoulders hunched like she was bracing for impact. But there was no impact coming, not for me. I know last night was bad, she began slowly. I said things I shouldn't have said. I embarrassed myself. I embarrassed you. I let her speak. For once, she didn't fill the silence with rehearsed explanations. It felt unscripted, raw even, but it didn't change the truth sitting between us. I don't know why I do that sometimes, she continued. Why I say things I don't mean. Why I push you away. I get caught up trying to look a certain way in front of people, and, Dana, I said gently, you did mean it. She froze. I've watched you treat me like that for a long time. The party just made it public. Her eyes went glossy, though she blinked quickly to hide it. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. But you did. Silence again. Heavy this time. She reached across the table, hesitating before her fingers touched the wood. I want to fix this. I know I haven't been good to you, but I can change. We can work on this. We can go to counseling. Just don't pull away. Not like this. Her voice trembled, but I didn't reach for her hand. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because something inside me had already stepped beyond where her apology could reach. Dana, I said slowly, clearly, I don't want counseling. Her breath caught. I don't want to keep trying. I don't want to pretend we're still building something. We aren't. She stared at me like the room had tilted beneath her. You're leaving, she said, barely audible. Yes. A tiny, broken sound escaped her throat, something between disbelief and denial. Please, she said, leaning forward, palms pressed together like she was praying. Please don't do this. I was awful last night. I know that. Just let me make it right. I shook my head gently. It isn't about last night. Last night was a mirror. It showed me what I've been ignoring. Tears slid down her cheeks now, silent but constant. I'll change, she whispered. You won't, I said softly. And it's okay that you won't. But it means we don't fit. Not anymore. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. For a moment, I felt something like sorrow, not for losing her, but for the years I spent trying to hold together something neither of us truly understood. When she finally lowered her hands, her voice was rough. Is there anything I can say to change your mind? No, the word wasn't cruel. It was final, clean. The kind of truth you don't argue with because a deeper part of you already knows it's settled. She nodded slowly, eyes distant, as if she were watching her life rearrange itself in real time. When? She asked. Soon, I said, but I'll handle everything carefully. We'll divide things fairly. There won't be chaos. I'm not here to punish you. She wiped her face with shaking fingers. But you're leaving anyway. Yes. I stood, not abruptly, and she didn't stand with me. She just watched as I walked to the door, as if each step were carving a new reality she wasn't ready to inhabit. When I reached the doorway, I paused. I hope, I said quietly, you find someone who fits your life the way you need. Someone who doesn't feel like a burden to you. Someone who doesn't disappear inside the relationship. She closed her eyes like the words physically hit her. I stepped outside into the cool morning air. The sky was pale blue, touched with faint streaks of gold. The street was quiet, the world indifferent to the dissolution of a marriage that had been fading long before either of us admitted it. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't outline the future in my mind. I didn't map out the months ahead. I just walked toward my car with the steady, grounded certainty that I was stepping toward a life where I didn't have to shrink to fit. A life where I could breathe fully again. A life that belonged to me. And as I closed the car door, as the engine hummed to life beneath my hands, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Something simple, something quiet, something powerful. Freedom. If you made it this far, make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. I'll see you in the next story.